This is a 1.2 metre half-standard heritage apple tree. It would cost you more than £30 pot grown from a specialist nursery. But we produced it for a few pounds by buying in some rootstock and grafting onto them. Well, today I want to complete the self-sufficient journey and show you how we're going to produce our own rootstocks so we can produce heritage apple trees and other fruit trees for no money at all. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the garden on a dry, clear winter's day. We could do with more of these. Welcome to coppicing rootstocks for fruit trees. Coppicing is an ancient art, really ancient, and it was used to produce small timber in good quantities when you needed it. So, for example, long before bamboos were imported from across the world for our bean poles, people produced their own by coppicing. If you take certain kinds of trees, cut them off at ground level, what they'll do is spring back lots and lots of smaller poles from a single rootstock, and that's called a coppiced stool. And in the past, that's how bean poles were produced. You'd cut down certain kinds of trees, these poles would spring up. Things like hazel are absolutely ideal for doing that, but plenty of other trees do work that way as well. And then when they got to the size you wanted, you'd cut them off and it didn't kill the tree. They'd spring back with more and more poles. It's also done for firewood. Dropping really large mature trees is both a waste of a tree that could be used for planks and for other important purposes, but also it's actually hard to handle. It's hard to split, the trunk is heavy. If you coppice something like ash, it will spring back into poles, and when they get to the sort of thickness of your arm, you can cut them off, section them up, and you've got ready-made perfect firewood logs. And that's called short cycle coppicing. So these skills are still really relevant today. Now, the rootstocks, if you buy them in small quantities for fruit trees, can be £3 each. But they're very easy to produce. So what I want to go through today is how to coppice something. And the theory applies whatever you want to do. But what we're also going to do is take a quick look and have a quick recap about science and rootstocks. Only take a minute or two, and then I'll show you how we plan to produce rootstocks through coppicing to make our own fruit trees. Let's take a look at the base of this tree. This part of the base is a crabapple rootstock known as an MM106. This part came from a heritage apple tree, an Ashmead's kernel apple tree. And through grafting, I've joined the two together. The rootstock I've used is one called MM106, and that doesn't matter. What it does matter is that it's not as vigorous as the rootstock of a proper apple tree. So it will constrain this apple tree to grow no bigger than about 4 metres tall and 4 metres wide, which is still quite a large tree, and you can get rootstocks that will make them much smaller than that. But the point of grafting is it will keep this tree to a manageable size. So let's look at the process of actually coppicing. In this pot, I've got a single MM106 crabapple rootstock that I'm endeavouring to turn into multiple MM106 crabapple rootstocks, and I'm going to plant it out today. So we're going to have it out of this pot, going to have a look at it in detail, but I'm going to bring you in close, show you what I started with, show you what I'm trying to do, and then we can look at how to plant it out, how to make it even bigger, and we'll talk about how to do different types of coppicing that can produce you the kind of wood you need for the purposes that you want. This is an experimental MM106 crabapple coppiced stool. God, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Let me explain what we're looking at here. A year ago, this twig here was one MM106 commercially bought rootstock, and I planted it in the middle of the pot. It produced four branches. Each of those, I bent them over. So let's have a look. This one, bent it over, pushed it into the ground. Scratch the bark a little bit with my thumbnail. And that's a process called layering. And what I want it to do is for it to root down here where I pushed it in. And if it does, I can just cut that branch through and I've got a new rootstock. But look, it's produced itself 1, 2, 3, 4 new little stems. And if I bend each of those over, let them root, what I can get there is 4 or 5 new rootstocks from one of the 4 branches. Now, I don't know if this has worked, but I suspect it might have done. So what I want to do is take this out of the pot, plant it out somewhere where it's got more room to spread, and we'll examine it together. As I've been moving it over to where I want to plant it out, I've noticed that we've got a big crack right down the side of this pot. So it's probably going to fall apart, to be honest, when we pull the rootstock out. It happens with ceramic pots, frost gets to them, etc. I'd like to save the pot if I can, but if it goes, at least we anticipated it. That was easier than I anticipated. Please give thanks to my glamorous assistant. So what we've got here is quite clearly some really good root development from this branch that runs all the way over to here and is created basically a new complete rootstock. So the next job is to tease that out, cut through the original branch, and then we can replant this to generate multiple rootstocks for the future. Here you can see where I coiled, this was a branch and it was coiled around the pot. So cut it through there. We have a very strong, healthy new crabapple and 2 potential rootstocks. But here, if I uncoil this, you can see 1, 2, 3 more rootstocks all on one branch. Excuse the chickens in the background. We've got 6 young crabapple trees out of 1 rootstock that way. Now, what I want to do is plant each of these and turn each one into a coppice to produce multiple crabapple roots, MM106 size crabapple rootstocks going forward. There's 2 ways you can do that. There's a method called the stool coppice and there's a method called the trench coppice. And I want to explore both of them with you. It involves planting these young rootstocks in different ways, but both of which will produce multiple individually rooted upgrowing rootstocks for future use. I'm going to use this as a great example of how we can plant and propagate these rootstocks. If I want to make a stool, I need to plant this deeply, the soil level here, and each of these branches will root and grow upwards and can then be cut off from the main stem, producing a rootstock in 1 to 2 years. The main stem will continue alive and produce more branches and more rootstocks, and it will get bigger and more vigorous as it grows. Let's have a look then at the other method. This is called the trench method, and what we would do is plant this at a very steep angle and put each of these branches in a trench. Maybe just lift the growing tip out of the soil at the end, and what will happen is new growth will rise from these branches when they root, and you'll get multiple rootstocks coming off each branch, and you can then snip apart the branch and produce multiple rootstocks, and it will end up, in fact, looking like that. And by dividing it, you get multiple rootstocks. So to start with, let's have a look at a stool planting. This is a nice little kind of MM106 crab, and what I want to do is plant it at a slight angle just so that each of these branches is below the soil. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 each of which by this time next year, with a bit of luck, will be a good strong rootstock ready for grafting. So I'm popping it into a hole I've just dug with a trowel, and as you can see, each of those branches is going in below soil level. For this particular piece, I want these well underground. So this is going to form another coppiced stool, and we want each of these rooting off independently. Water in well and mark the spots so that you know what's rootstock and what's weeds. Let's have a quick look at a layered trench. I'm going to plant this one in at this kind of an angle, and I'm going to bend that branch down so that it will put lots of long, nice new growths up over a year or two. So we just dig a trench out, we pop it into the ground like that. Just like the coppiced stool, water in the layered trench and mark it so that you know where it is. That's 6 new stools to create crabapple MM106 rootstocks planted behind me. If you're the sort of person who likes to read about these things, as I am, this is my Bible on plant propagation. It's the Royal Horticultural Society book called Propagating Plants. I'll put a link to it in the description down the bottom. It's a cracking book. It covers not just how to graft a tree, but how to produce your own rootstocks to do it. It's a really, really self-sufficient guide. It is massively useful, and I can't recommend it too highly for somebody who's interested in self-sufficiency, self-reliance, small holding, keeping their costs down. Don't forget though, we've also got our own video series on grafting apple trees. Link somewhere up there above. In that initial planting then, we've got a coppiced stool of directly upright little growths that will grow into new twigs that are all self-rooted and can be severed. And we've got a layered trench, which will do the same thing by laying 1 or 2 branches flat along in a trench, covering them in soil, and they will hopefully put up lots and lots of individual, nice, straight, tall rootstocks for the future. If you're enjoying this kind of content, can you spare us 5 seconds? Give us a thumbs up down below. Would you like to see more on propagation, other kinds of fruit trees? What about currants? Do you want to see how we propagate strawberries or raspberries, all that kind of thing? If so, please leave us a comment, let us know, and we'll do those kind of videos for you. And if you want to see more from us, hit subscribe, hit the bell next to it, and you'll hear every time we upload a new video. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.